Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Thursday night Anamkara meditation program. And with all my heart, with all my love, I welcome you to our program this evening. And I thank you for joining us at satsang, keeping the company of the truth. The truth is who you are. The truth is you are the divine, the infinite, the one. And satsang, the coming together to be in the company of the truth, is to come together and really open the doors to knowing that fully and completely in the moment, so that we're empowered then to walk it into the world, walk it into our everyday lives. So thank you for coming this evening. Thank you for being ones who do practices at a time and in a world that is not necessarily supporting everybody doing that and looking beyond the material world. So to be a carrier of that truth, to be engaged in practice, it's just wonderful that that's what you do, and you bring the power of your commitment, the power of your practices, and the power of your sublime self to this evening. So welcome and thank you for coming. We're going to be starting with the opening mantras, and the opening mantras are a way really of invoking that highest nature of the truth of who we are. And mantra has that unique power as a throb of the infinite to really transform the mind. The mind is a throb of the infinite too, but it's a throb of the infinite caught in the domain of the finite, caught and bound by the thoughts, the feelings, the things we identify with. Mantra comes straight from the infinite, straight from the source. It's not mind-born. And thus it has the power to take us back to the source of which it is a throb here and now. So we're going to start with the opening mantras and then sit for a few moments just in the stillness, the quietness, because mantra helps to quiet the mind and pull our consciousness from being fully identified with even the content of the mind. So even if the content's there, we have a greater spaciousness of being to be present with, detached from that mind and all its vagaries. So we'll begin with the opening mantras. Shri Kali Devi Ki Jai Gajananam Bhuta Ganari Sevitam Kapita Jambu Palacharu Bhakshanam Umasutam Shokam Vinashakarakam Namami Vigneshwara Parapankajam Shri Ganeshaya Namaha Shri Ganeshaya Namaha Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamandaya Purnamevavashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shri Kali Mahadevi Ki Jai. And once again, with all my heart, I welcome you to our program this evening. So tonight is the first Thursday of the month, and so it's usually a talk about Dharma, Dharma meaning practice, and how do we live the practices, how do we imbibe the practices, and how the power of the practices really support our ability to be fully present in the moment, in the world, living the lives that we live. We're householders is what the term is in the Hindu yogic tradition for a stage of life in which practices are done, living in the world with family and relationships and taking on the tasks of work and monitoring what's going on with politics, what's going on with the environment, all the responsibilities that householders have. And it's long been recognized as a very challenging sadhana, a very challenging context. In fact, many centuries ago and up until not that long ago, many traditions thought that living life as a householder precluded being able to really attain the highest, know the highest, because our consciousness, our mind, was so bound by the world, so bound by Dharma. Our Dharma is to live in the world and carry the responsibilities that we carry. And these were seen as, in a sense, obstacles to being able to know the infinite. But it was really as the traditions turned towards the integration into everyday life that you see both in the Hindu yogic tradition and in the Buddhist tradition. That was accompanied by the notion of the Tantric Traditions. Tantra meaning that every moment is a leaping off point for knowing the infinite, that there's never a time, there's never a place when that consciousness isn't available to us. And it really has to do with shifting what we're identified with in the moment, not changing the landscape of our lives to go live in a cave or a monastery. So realizing the highest in the midst of everyday life is really the calling for this age. This age in the Eastern traditions known as Kali Yuga, a dark age, dark in terms of ignorance, ignorance abounding, people being cut off from the truth of who they are and then acting out of ignorance in ways that brings more and more suffering to themselves and others. So this is an age for then living in the world, but living wisdom into the world, living truth into the world, living, what Buddha talked about as the four immeasurables, the boundless compassion, the boundless wisdom, the boundless joy, the unshakable equanimity. Well, those qualities are also what are spoken about in the yogic tradition and sort of summarized in the term Satchidananda. It said that that's a term that kind of encompasses or describes the fullness of this pure consciousness of the root of who we are. Sat means that was just true at all times and all places. The eternality of that. Chit is consciousness. It's conscious. It knows itself as all that is. And Ananda is the loving, joyous, rapturous experience of what that is. So Satchidananda, it's really beyond any words, beyond any formula or description, but it's a word that points to the truth of who we are. We need those pointers, because in everyday life there's a lot of pointers going, oh, you're just this, you're just the man, you're just the woman, you just have this job, you just have this role. And so the pointers of everyday life are pointing towards a very contracted sense of who and what we are. And out of that comes all that we're missing, all that we lack, all that we then want, all that we then pursue. And that's what drives the whole wheel of karma, the wheel of action and the consequences of action. And it's why in the Eastern traditions, it was really emphasized that to break that cycle means to come home to the truth of who we are. That all the suffering is arising out of the ignorance the not knowing the fullness of who we are. And that's what the practices really are aimed at. And so when we're talking about various practices, like the use of mantra, mantra as a sound form of the infinite. That's how it's literally described. Mantra, the word, means that which protects. What does it protect us from? Ignorance. Protects us from our very mind. Right? So when the mind, instead of just jabbering on, is repeating Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Well, now it doesn't have that web of thoughts that contract it and bind it. Now it just has the one, the living presence of the one. But we want to bring some understanding to that as well, and understanding that, for instance, with that Maha Mantra, this great mantra, the mantra of lineage I was a part of with Swami Muktananda and Bhagavan Nityananda, and going back all the way to Shiva, that this mantra has that power to transform consciousness in ways that the ordinary thinking and ordinary mind cannot do. And so taking refuge in mantra, it becomes a really important practice because it brings us to a state that is the state of your real self, your true self. That state is often described as the state of the witness, this boundless field of consciousness that sees all as itself, embraces all with a rapturous love. That Satchidananda is the state of unity consciousness, way beyond the ordinary mind. But even by approaching that through mantra, we start to calm and stabilize the mind, so that the mind as an instrument for moving through the world, moving through this domain. Again, in the yoga tradition, this ordinary existence that we have is known as karma bhumi. Karma, the law of cause and effect, of action and reaction. Bhumi, the domain of, the world of. So it's a domain where we get to see the consequences played out of our actions across lifetimes, so that we learn both to become more skillful, grounded in ourselves, and that our actions then are in accord with that. That transforms the karmas, the consequences of our actions, that we will then live out. So it's all about coming back to the truth of who we are, and coming back to that consciousness. I'd like to share, this is a poem from Kali's Bazaar. We've been running a course on this, so this is one of the poems from that. It's called The Knower. Well, darkness is secondary. Who is the knower who illumines all darkness? Light is secondary. Who is the knower who illumines even the sun? Mystery is secondary. Who is the knower who penetrates all mysteries? Knowledge is secondary. Who is the knower who is the source of all knowledge? Wisdom is secondary. Who is the knower, the wellspring of wisdom from whom all scriptures have come? Pleasure and suffering are secondary. Who is the knower, the stainless one, untouched by desire and attachment, who looks upon all with love and compassion? Form and emptiness are secondary. Who is the knower in whose clear and boundless light of awareness form and emptiness embrace? Birth and death are secondary. Who is the knower, the unborn one, undying, eternally pure? O my beloved, Tatwam Asi, thou art that. Tatwam Asi. one of the Mahavakyas, one of the great statements from the ancient Upanishads, aiming to point us right to the direction of where the truth lies. Thou art that. Whatever we're reading about in these wonderful and exalted texts from the Upanishads or the sutras, from Buddha, they're all pointing at the truth that that's your nature. They point to that foundational component to practice is holding the awareness of I am that. I am that. That when we hear of the Auspicious One, Shiva means the Auspicious One, we then hold that with the awareness. I am that. I am that boundless one. I am the one who's eternally free. Not the mind, right? When we're identified with the mind, when we're identified with our conventional sense of self, then we feel bound, limited, lacking this, wanting that, needing this, not having that, suffering this, suffering that. That's all within the confines of the domain of the ordinary mind. So the practices are relentless in that sense of pushing us. No, let go of that in order to come home to the truth of who you are. The truth being, I am the infinite, I am the boundless one. Shivoham, Shivoham means I am the auspicious one. Great mantra, Shivoham, Shivoham. Chidananda Rupaha, Shivoham, Shivoham. I am consciousness and bliss. I am Shiva, I am Shiva. That's our true home. That's what then gives us the power to walk through this crazy world of karma bhumi, where there's so many things going on, so many dynamics, so many people completely unconscious of the consequences of their own actions. Right? And even in the moment, even not even on some exalted level, just even in the moment, people not being cognizant of, hey, if I don't wear a mask and I'm around people who are sick, I'm going to get sick. I mean, you don't have to go far to see ignorance in full flower. And so we have to be grounded in the fullness of ourself and walk wisdom, walk knowledge, walk truth into the world. With that kind of recognition that we're Dharma holders, right? We uphold Dharma. I've said this any number of times in talking about this age, and the great symbol of successive ages out of the Hindu tradition was the great cow of Dharma. And that in the first age, she stands strong on all four legs. As the 4 ages progress, Dharma is symbolically represented as being diminished by her losing a limb, losing a leg. So here we are in the 4th age of this cycle that goes on and on and on eternally. But poor Ma Dharma has one leg. How's she going to stand? How is Dharma going to stand in the world? Well, it's also the message to that is we're her legs. We stand for Dharma. Right? So becoming more wise, becoming more compassionate, becoming more loving and kind, patient and having equanimity allows us to stand for Dharma in the world. We don't have to stand for Dharma with a club or anything. No, we stand by inhabiting that state of wisdom, that state of Dharma. Then Dharma Shakti, the power of Dharma, both uplifts us and helps us to transform the world in which we find ourselves. So we keep coming back to that. And by giving the mind a refuge in mantra, like the great mantra, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. We're going to be chanting that in a little bit for going into meditation. We're giving the mind a place to rest and come back to its source. The one that sees the mind, the knower who sees the mind, that's your boundless nature. That's that witness consciousness that's also suffused with those other qualities. The poor mind is an instrument for differentiation. It separates things out. And so even when it tries to describe or know the infinitude of being, of pure being, and what that is, what the experience of that is, at best it comes up with those 3 or 4 words, whether it's Satchidananda or the 4 immeasurables of Buddha, but they're just one. Going into that state, there's just unity. And that's the power of mantra, to both bring us into that totality of that state of unity, as well as to be there right behind the poor mind, but now infusing it with that wisdom, with that knowing, even as it faces the ordinary world of karma bhumi. So that even the ordinary mind begins to be infused with that wisdom, that steadiness of being, that equanimity, that loving, compassionate understanding. All coming through that. And mantra is a way of doing that. Right? So mantra helps us to step back from being identified with the mind. If we're being identified with Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, we would have to let go of that in order to get identified with, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that, I wish it was this, oh, I really like that, but boy, that's not going to last. Every time we get identified with the mind like that, the fact is we're letting go of those sublime riches, those exquisite qualities of true being. And we're not only letting go of that in ourselves, we're letting go of the knowing of that in ourselves. We lose the recognition of that as the essence of every being. We treat them like they're just another mind. They're just another contracted, wanting this, wanting that. Maybe they want the same thing I want. They're going to take what I want. But, I mean, we're just caught up in this. It's almost like when you're doing audio work and you get a feedback loop, between a mic and a speaker, and it winds up in this screaming noise. That's the world. Huh? That's this negative feedback loop between ignorance and ignorance, ignorance, just people bound up in ignorance. And right there within each and every one is still the radiance of the knower. The knower who's illuminating that experience is always present. That witness is always there. Always. But it's often when we start to move towards quieting the mind, primarily because we're so identified with the noise, we're so driven, the mind is driven, it's like compulsive. It's engagement with this thought, that feeling, this perception, this memory, this anticipation. It's just compulsive about it. It doesn't know. I don't have to give attention to all that stuff. I can shift my attention away from it. I can let that go. And it has to practice that in order to reclaim that strength. But that's what then helps to begin setting us free more and more, because that's how we enter the state of that witness. Because the witness is always that silent presence, illuminating everything about our experience, holding it all in this field of loving awareness, loving, compassionate, patient, kind awareness, holding everything about you and the world in that state. Knowing that empowers us to be a wholly different force in the world. But we make use of the practices to help dislodge our consciousness from being so identified with all that content. That's part of what a practice of the witness that's also invoked through mantra helps us to become steady in that. This is another poem from Kali's Bazaar. This one's titled, It's All About Stillness. It's all about stillness, this life, this death, this moment arising, this moment swallowed by Kali Ma. The ever-present stillness of being, infinite, spacious, eternally free. Kali's beloved, Lord Shiva, you and me. Move with that awareness throughout the day, through periods of silence, meditation, and chanting, through walking, eating, speaking, and working. All movement arises out of stillness. Return to stillness over and over and over. And then watch the mind. See how it craves movement, how it begs attention to follow its desires and attachments. See how letting go of these immediately opens the experience of spaciousness, of bare awareness. The distant movements of thoughts and perceptions darting about like fireflies in the night sky. So you just witness, you're watching. Every moment, my dear one, is an opportunity to look beyond the movements of mind, which delude you into feeling you are that tiny, ephemeral collection of fireflies. Know the infinite expanse of the sky of awareness. Become a sky dancer. Know you are Shiva, you are Buddha. Om Tat Sat. Om, that's the truth. That's the truth of who you are, who every being is. But to know that truth, we have to let go of being identified with the limitations of the mind, to come home to the infinitude of our being, the truth of who we are. That's what it means, whether we're thinking about taking refuge in Buddha and Buddhist practice, taking refuge in mantra, taking refuge in the divine, taking refuge in Mother Mary. All of these are ways of trying to point to let go of being so habitually identified with all this content, the narrative of our lives, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we've suffered and what we have to anticipate, all that stuff. Let it go. Let it go. Even if it's just for a moment, let it go. It'll be right back. It's going to take a while for it to really get free. Right? But letting it go, oh, it's so nourishing. It's so fulfilling in itself that it empowers us to even bear the times when we get caught in that ignorance, in that wrong identification. Ignorance is another way of talking about wrong identification, meaning I'm not identified with the truth of who I am, I'm identified with something the mind has created. And Buddha talked about that too as the root cause of all suffering. So it's not that there's a mind producing these limited things, it's that we get identified with those limited thoughts, feelings, roles, all that stuff. So that's why Buddha talked about the middle way. The middle way, interestingly, has a real resonance and came out of the yogic tradition, came out even of the Shiva tradition. What's Shiva famous for carrying? A trident, right? A trident. The middle way of the trident is the long way. That's the central path. That's also a symbol of the Sushumna Nadi, the middle way. Not the Ida and the Pingala, not the sun and the moon, not the fire and the coolness that are symbolized by those nadis. The middle way that connects the infinite to the finite and infuses it all with consciousness. That's the symbolic meaning of the Sushumna Nadi and the chakras. They're not a physical thing. So we have to have that kind of understanding to be able to see, that's what we're called to know. And guess what? The middle way is already at the root of your being. You don't have to create the middle way. Right? It's right there. We don't create mantra. Mantra is already throbbing within you. Om Namah Shivaya was first heard in the profound depths of meditation and brought forth as a vocalization to help others attune themselves to what's already present. This throb of the infinite continuously resounding inside. So you can have the experience of that. I remember one time I was running in the ashram, I was running a program for that really focused on the power of mantra and the power of Om Namah Shivaya, right? And that power that is a direct throb of the Auspicious One, who is often seen as this blue light of consciousness, not a form, not masculine, not feminine, just this infinite field of blue consciousness throbbing as the universe. And in meditation, that started out. I would just see that light suffusing everything, right? And then one night as I was going into meditation and then into sleep, it was so bright, I thought there was an outside light on. I opened my eyes. It was the same blazing blue light. Eyes open, eyes closed. Eyes open, eyes closed. Nothing but blue light, shimmering with the power of mantra, beyond sound. And then the last thing was that experience of that shimmering, ecstatic, blissful, rapturous, and then gone. Because even the separation of a perceiver and the perceived was gone, gone. Right? That's what we have within each and every one of us. That capacity, that consciousness. That's what can then inform our lives, empower our actions, give us the detachment to be able to look with compassion and understanding at others flailing about in suffering and creating suffering for others, perhaps even for ourselves. But every being is flailing about in that ignorance, that state of wrong understanding, wrong identification. Their sublime nature is still there, but not knowing that, humans are capable of all the atrocities that we see. All horrific reflections of ignorance, wrong understanding, wrong identification. So we need to be grounded in that kind of wisdom ourselves so that we can stand for Dharma in the world and walk that kind of wisdom into the world. Right? Whether we're trying to support, the politicians doing the right things, leaders doing the right things, we're now supported by knowing the truth of who and what we are beyond all this, so that we have the strength to face what unfolds in this domain called karma bhumi, this domain of the consequences of learning, the excruciatingly slow process of seeing our actions and their consequences, and that we are accountable for all the consequences of all our actions. And by refining our awareness so that we're acting from the truth of who we are, that we're acting from a vision of the truth of who others are and what this world is, and all the beings, not just human beings, all the beings. Right? So when we even think of in the environment and taking care of the earth and the environment and climate, that too is a reflection of, we don't want to impose suffering on any beings. Right? We want to uphold the fullness of the divine presence throughout creation. But to know that directly, we do the practices. We enter the stillness, so we come to know that fully in ourselves. and then are more and more empowered to live that into the world. And mantra is one of the key ways of being able to do that. And so we're going to be chanting Om Namah Shivaya as a way of helping to become absorbed in mantra. But also mantra, the throb of mantra, the sound form of mantra, well, it penetrates our entire body. And it penetrates our physical body right down to the marrow of our bones. Right? So the healing power, the transformative power of mantra is really extraordinary. It transforms our environment around us. I used to do programs every week for a couple of years in federal and state prisons, penitentiaries, horrible places. I'd bring my harmonium, we'd go in and start chanting. And even ghastly environments like that would be transformed. And inmates would have these extraordinary experiences because the power of mantra, well, it knows no bounds. It can enter everything and transform that. So when we're consciously letting it fulfill our body, fill our mind, fill our consciousness, and that mantra exists on many levels. The level of, the highest or purest level of mantra is that unbounded awareness of I am that, Shivam, beyond even that thought form. Mantra has to coalesce some, even to become perceptible as light. And then that throb and that shimmer of light can coalesce and become even denser and become the thought forms of Om Namah Shivaya. And then coalesce and condense even more and become the sound form, the vibratory form of Om Namah Shivaya. But simultaneously, it exists on all those levels. All at once, right here, right now. So as we're chanting Om Namah Shivaya, allow your awareness to expand, to know all these levels are existing right here, right now. You are a throb of that. Every cell of your body is a throb of that. Every atom of every cell is that. That's what we come to know. That's where radical freedom rests. So we're going to chant this Maha Mantra, this great mantra, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. We'll chant it in unison. It's a slow chant, a meditative chant. We'll chant for a few minutes and then just sit in the stillness that opens after that. And if the mind is moving, it's okay. Just keep your awareness coming back to Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Just silently repeating it within. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. The witness throbs as mantra. The witness is present, illuminating that inner reverberation of mantra. The witness, Shiva, is illuminating every thought, every sensation. Let go of the thought, let go of the sensation, let go of the memory. Go to the luminous one, the knower who knows. I am that. So now we'll chant. Letting go of all the things of the mind, to rest in pure awareness. The seer was never seen, the knower is never known, but throbs with Om Namah Shivaya. We end with this prayer, and may all our practices truly benefit everyone, and may all beings know complete freedom from suffering. Namaste. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. To be the seer, the one who sees all, in that space, infinite being, boundless love. Shiva Shiva Mahadev. Namah Shivaya Sara Shiva. What use have I for calling out my own name when it is my beloved Kali I eternally long for? Kali, 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 Mahakali, Mahadevi, the great goddess. How you delight in putting on the form of the universe and doing your love dance for me to watch. There's not one of your forms that doesn't know the warm caress of my adoring lips. Shiva, Kali, the eternal lovers. All this is the unfolding of that love. To see through the eyes of Shiva is to see his beloved Kali everywhere. To see through the eyes of Kali is to see her beloved Shiva everywhere. Seeing the divine The Auspicious One is all there is. No matter what form it takes, how contracted it becomes, how expansive, all one, all one, all you. Know that, you know freedom. So thank you for coming this evening. Thank you for being ones who do the practices and carry the wisdom of your own self, the wisdom of the truth that you are that, carrying that into the world as love, as compassion, as kindness, as patience, as wisdom, as strength, as standing for Dharma. Thank you. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks.